All right, ladies and gentlemen, I promise you that this one tonight is going to be explosive. The fireworks are going to be out. It might be getting colder here in New York and certainly in the UK, but we are going to warm things up because we have historic KOW 10-year anniversary coverage with our very dear friend who holds, I think she's at the top of the list all time in Sportswire history and appearances. It's been a hot skip in a minute since we've had her, but I promise you she's going to make for it and some up and kindly. So let's get right to it. So without further ado here on the Sports Report, number one global sports show, pro wrestling writer, journalist, reporter, and everything else in between for KLW and Odyssey Pro Wrestling. That is Lucy Simons. Lucy, how are you?
I'm great after hearing that. Thank you, Tom. It's been a long
Well,
time since I've heard that.
Well, that's why I wanted to give you an extra long
Oh,
intro.
yeah.
Wanted to make sure we gave you a couple seconds more because at this point, we missed you. We were like, "Where's Lucy? We got to get Lucy." And I thought the perfect time to get you on here was for the 10-year anniversary show that just took place at Cloud9, the Lounge and Barrel. Of course, you were there. You had a front row seat for it. We're also going to have a major announcement in a little while regarding a KOW guest, a champion, a current champion, a new champion is all I'm going to say. You'll find out in a little while for sure, and I'm sure you'll be certainly looking forward to hearing that announcement. But certainly, it is good to be with you, Lucy. Obviously, a lot to get into. I'm really, really excited about recapping this because obviously we had ALP on a couple of weeks ago, and I was fired up. And you know how much KOW means to us here on Sportswire Radio, and especially to the good people of Barrow. So before we get into the card and get into the matches and everything else in between, talk about the feeling of being there and just how special it was this past weekend at Cloud9 The Lounge.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said, it's so true. Such a special night, and I think there was so much anticipation going into it. And the atmosphere when you walked into Cloud9 was it was electric. You could tell that they'd sold out, and they'd even sold more than out. They'd sold over capacity. I think it was something like 220 tickets
Wow.
was sold, which
Wow.
yeah, I know. So I'm so proud of the team for managing to sell out because so much work went behind the card, and I think everyone in Barrow just wanted to be there, and everyone did go. And it's a testament to how hard Andy and everyone behind the scenes works to creating these shows and promoting them really well. And it was definitely worth all the hype. I'll just say that before we get into it. It was one hell of a show.
I'm surprised you even have a voice still at this point. I mean,
Oh,
certainly,
yeah.
we'll try to be respectful of your time, obviously, but certainly, I did feel like, at least from watching some of the tributes and some of the posts on social media, Facebook and Twitter, that there was something special there. I mean, we knew that, we kind of had that feeling, but certainly for sure, it did have those 220 people. It felt like, honestly, at least from what I heard, it felt a lot more than 220 people. Anybody who knows Cloud9 in the Lounge, to have been able to accomplish what the team did in management, that's very, very impressive because they were tickets that were still available. So this kind of all happened, I think, within the last really 24 to 48 hours of the show that we were able to kind of pull that off.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I definitely remember seeing like, oh, we've got last like 75%
That's
tickets.
exactly it.
Oh, what's that?
Thursday night,
Yeah.
75% capacity to go over to, let's say, 110,
Mm.
115% capacity, knowing what the capacity size of Cloud9 and Lounge. I mean, that's really almost unheard of.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they sold fast the tickets. I think there was like one big last push for all the tickets, and that did really well. I mean, in all fairness to the team and everyone at Cloud9, it didn't feel like it was too full. It didn't feel, sometimes at British wrestling, there's a lot of people stood up, and that's not ideal. It's not very comfortable to stand up for a
No,
wrestling
no,
show.
no, no,
But
definitely not.
it wasn't really like that. They made good use of the space. There was only a couple of people standing. It was great. I mean, I love Cloud9. It's such a great venue.
It's always been, it's funny you said that because obviously we spoke about a lot of different places on Sportswire Radio, whether it's in the UK or in other places now, because we do some pro wrestling coverage in the States and the Midwest. And I've always still felt to this day, in almost 2 years, that it's something different with Cloud9. Cloud9 is just something a little bit special, whether it's the atmosphere where it's in, whether it's the venue itself, whether it's just all the different factors that make it such a special place. I've always felt that Cloud9 holds a special place, not only in our hearts, in KOW history's hearts, but obviously the good people of Barrow. And of course, you had a front row seat. But let's get right into it because obviously I do want to get into the announcement in a little while. But obviously, let's talk about the show itself. And I want to go to the tag team titles because this was kind of, I think when I look at KOW feuds of 2022, I don't know if it was the most personal or was the best feud, but it was sort of the dynamic where you had obviously the Freak Show, who were the tag team champions, but actually weren't holding possession of the tag team titles. Of course, they were held by the underclass, and of course, a friend that is no stranger to us, and the unforgettable Andre Decker, and obviously set the tables for us because it looks like now, Lucy, we finally have new tag team champions, and the Freak Show's run, their long, long run as champions, because obviously they had won the titles
Mhm.
before COVID and held on to it for basically till the end of time, it felt like. But we do have new champions, and certainly the underclass have pulled it off. And Andre Decker, after all the times he has been with us on Sportswire Radio talking about those titles, he now holds them, and he can actually go into the history books as a champion. So for those that are listening and watching here on Sportswire Radio, talk about how it all happened.
Yeah, this match, like you say, there was quite a lot of history behind it. I mean, the underclass and the freak show they're kind of like mortal enemies, I guess. Like they're just destined to feud, I think. But this kind of felt like it was really coming to a head. The freak show had this such long legacy with the tag team titles. Like you said, it was through COVID, so you know the underclass kind of had a reason to argue that it wasn't, they weren't.
Andre Decker mentioned that here with us on Sportswire. That was something he had actually said, I believe, in one of the early appearances we had him on for.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair criticism, I suppose, but we'll just have to see how long the underclass can keep them for now that, they managed to come out successful from this match. There's quite a lot of drama going into this match, like what I've just said, and also before it could even kick off, Sheriff Steele came down to the ring and he basically said, I'm sick of the underclass constantly being one step ahead of me. They stole the tag team belts at the last show. They haven't given them back. They've always kind of got a trick up the sleeve, whether that was Logan being a fake referee, Keenan coming in to win the Showcase Championship, whether it was Jennifer back when she was in the company.
Yep.
But I think when the underclass kind of lost Two-Bit and Jennifer, they had a lot to prove. So they went into this match with something to prove, and I think Sheriff Steele knew that, so he kind of wanted to take the precautions for it. So he said, I'm commissioner. I want to be one step ahead of you for once. So there's going to be a special guest referee, and it turned out to be Craig Collins, and he'd actually wrestled earlier in the night and been unsuccessful.
Yep.
So it was quite surprising to see him back again. But he's the War Machine. You can imagine he'd be pretty good at keeping law and order even between the two massive.
I would have thought so. I mean, I think most of us would have thought so as well.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, and then once the match kicked off, it was the Freak Show were trying to, like Sheriff Steele said, the underclass always seemed to be one step ahead. So I think the Freak Show try to keep one step ahead of them. So even before the underclass could be introduced by ALP, Freak Show went on the attack. So they were in kind of like dominating for the first portion of the match. Nightmare was athletic as ever. But yeah, you mentioned Decker. He is such a powerhouse in the ring. I mean, he just puts such an abrupt end to any
I think
sort
he's
of.
one of the biggest powerhouses, frankly, in all of professional wrestling. I mean, you look at the size and what he's done. You've seen him in other companies. I mean, what he brings to the table and that sheer size. I mean, certainly Nightmare and the unhinged Will Carter, they certainly have the agility, but it's
Mhm.
so hard to be able to compete with that sheer size and that sheer strength that the unforgettable Andre Decker brings to the table.
Definitely. I think that sometimes Nightmare can be hard to ground, but Decker is not afraid just to put an abrupt end to it straight away with his strength. And to be fair, I thought that Logan might have been the weak link in this match because he didn't
We
have.
spoke about that in the past. When we've spoken about that before with you and even ALP. That's a good point.
I thought that maybe because Logan doesn't have the same amount of in-ring experience as Decker, certainly not one-on-one, but against the Freak Show. But to be fair, they worked really well together. They've clearly done all the practicing, and they had the double team moves that worked really well. And Logan was really fast to take out Will Carter on the apron whenever it looked like he was going to get tagged in. But Collins was kind of making himself known as the referee. I mean, he was definitely present in the match. He wasn't just like a passive referee.
I wouldn't think otherwise from the
Yeah.
War Machine, Craig Collins, our former KOW champion. I mean, this is a multi-time world champion. You knew that he was going to be a presence and a factor in this match.
Exactly. Yeah, he was having a go whenever he felt it was necessary, and when so basically, I think it was Logan had Nightmare up on his shoulders, and Nightmare was reaching out to Will Carter, and they managed to get the tag, but Craig Collins didn't see it, so he was like, "No, you're not getting in the ring," and he started getting an argument with him, and that it all exploded from there. But Carter did eventually manage to get in the ring, and he was just as explosive as you would imagine. I mean, he was so full of energy. He managed to take out both members of the underclass somehow. From then onwards, it was very, very chaotic. So Logan ended up body slamming Nightmare on the stage. So that kind of spells a little bit of disaster for Will Carter. He was kind of left fighting on his own in the ring. Nightmare disappeared, and about 2 minutes later, I just looked up like, what are all those kids? What are those kids pointing at up there on the balcony? I looked up, and there is Nightmare. He's climbing over the balcony, and I'm like, no, don't do it. He's not going to do it. Yeah, he did it. He jumped from the balcony straight into the ring and hit both members of the underclass with probably the biggest crossbody that's ever happened, ever. And I mean, Tom, I know you've probably seen the pictures of Cloud9. It's not a low balcony.
No, you know what's funny? I even saw just before we went on the air, there was somebody that actually had posted a picture of Nightmare going up on top, and we've seen the balcony. We've seen obviously that place in terms of different KOW shows in history. I mean, that's something that kids don't try this at home.
Yeah, it was mad. I mean, it was what a spectacle that was, because I was sitting on the floor, seeing him flying through the air was just quite unbelievable, very dangerous. But somehow he ended up getting back up.
That's what I said this to you before we went on the air. I was like, Lucy, my first thought was going to be when we were going to speak about this live, how is Nightmare still standing and walking afterwards? I mean, because what he did, I mean, we're talking in all-time wrestling history. I mean, this was something that we would see like in TLC between Edge, Edge and Christian, the Hardys, and the Dudleys. This is the type of move that we would see it in Cloud9. I actually think it's more dangerous than what we saw in those famous matches, whether it was at the Royal Rumble and SummerSlam and all the other different shows we saw that legendary rivalry take place. I mean, this was the kind of move that I don't know how he was standing still.
No, I don't have a clue. And I think Nightmare seems like the type of person who would not plan for something of kind of just
that's for sure. You don't plan this here when it comes to at our level. Listen, it's basically like, look, you're going to do it. You better hope it works.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was just a spur of the moment thing, which, does that adrenaline, I guess, does that sort of thing to you. But that actually didn't end the match. I thought that for sure that might have been for the 3 count, but it actually wasn't. The match actually went on for like maybe 5 more minutes. So in these in these closing 5 minutes, there was so much chaos that Craig Collins, the special guest referee, ended up getting taken out. I think Logan was kind of spooked by the confidence of Nightmare to do that balcony dive, and he went and grabbed one of the championship belts. So he was hoping to use it as a weapon. But Collins was quickly back up to his feet because we know how tough he is. So he got quickly back up and he grabbed the belt off him, and he was like, no, you can't do that. So the Freak Show looked like they were about to win. So closing moments of the match. Surely? No. Craig Collins used the belt that he had seized and hit Nightmare across the head with it. And I was I was just sat there in shock, like, what? Where's the logic behind this? And everyone in shock. Everyone in Cloud now was in shock. And then the underclass managed to hit their finisher, and that was for the victory. And then Craig Collins decided to take Will Carter out with the Dominator at the end of the match after they'd lost. And the boos got even louder, if that was possible. And I don't know. I really don't know Collins' reasons behind this. I don't think he will join the underclass. He doesn't seem like the type of person who would want to join a faction. I feel like he's his own kind of independent person.
So then what gives here? I mean, what gives? I mean, because the War Machine Craig Collins just had his own problems, his own issues with the underclass, whether it was obviously with 2-Bit earlier this year, and certainly even with Andre Decker himself in the past, with everything else when it came to that whole situation with his championship that he tried to reclaim. I mean, I don't get this here, Lucy. Was there anything that anybody had said, you know what, well, maybe that's why the War Machine Craig Collins did it? Because, I mean, this is really hard. This is a head scratcher.
Well, yeah, and I'm scratching my head. I think you can possibly, so as I mentioned, Collins wasn't successful earlier in the night in his match, so he was in the vertical ladder match, which we haven't mentioned yet, but
we're going to talk about that next. We're going to talk about that next.
I will say that he was very close to winning that match, but he didn't. And I think when you reach that point of frustration, maybe you'll do anything to kind of get back some control. He's not really had much success in KOW since returning. So I think maybe this his way of being like, okay, I need to make a statement. This is how I'll do it.
But see what you just said, which to me I think has been the theme of the War Machine Craig Collins year, is that he's been close. He's been close in a lot of these matches. He's been close, right? But what's the common theme with close? You didn't win. So ultimately, maybe it's out of frustration that, you know what, he didn't reclaim his world championship this year, and he didn't win the ladder match, which would have given him a shot at reclaiming his championship. And this is kind of the frustration that, you know what, things ain't going my way, and it's not working for me, and unfortunately, the freak show got in the way from that. And maybe that's the possibility. Maybe that's the explanation here.
Yeah, possibly. I think maybe to him, if the freak show would have succeeded, it would have told him that they are better than him, and he's kind of lost control. I mean, being put in that referee position does give you quite a lot of control and say over how a match ends, as we've seen that in KOW quite a lot. Thinking about Logan as a special referee. I mean, not even as a special guest referee, just a referee in disguise. So I think maybe the power got to his head a bit in that.
But there's a point to be made here as we're speaking with pro wrestling writer extraordinaire, also reporter Lucy Simons, who of course covers things for KOW, and she was there at the historic 10-year anniversary show that took place this weekend at Cloud9 Lounge. And there's something to be said, though, that when it came to a situation with the War Machine Craig Collins, there really was no factors that would have said, all right, this is why it's going to happen. This is why. I mean, at least, okay, with Logan, disguised as a referee, 2-Bit, when he was the leader of the underclass, there was some sort of plan. There was always a plan. I don't know if there was anything here, at least from what you're telling me, and we had ALP on Sportswire Radio not too long ago, that there was really nothing or any factors that would have said, okay, this is why the War Machine Craig Collins is going to do this, because he's had such a rivalry with the underclass.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think maybe like we said with Nightmare diving off the balcony, adrenaline and spur of the moment things gets you to do weird things. I don't know if he planned this out as soon as he found out he was going to be a special guest referee, or if he just saw in that split second moment, I've got the championship in my hand, I can do whatever I want. I mean, he could have took the underclass out and let Freak Show win, you know, but for some reason,
and that would have been the thing to do, we would have thought, because we know the Freak Show has helped the War Machine, Greg Collins, in the past when he had the numbers game against him at prior KOW shows this year. This is why, to me, this is something that I think we're going to be speaking about, I think, throughout the year on Sportswire Radio till the next show for KOW, because this was something that I think the fans in Barrow and even I think people in the locker room were really taken back by, because there was really nothing that said here, okay, this is going to happen. Here's why. This is why, to me, I'm really, really caught off guard by this. This was something I did not see coming at all. I think you clearly didn't. You were there. You were there in Barrow, and you didn't think this was going to happen either. And I think at the end of the day, many other people kind of in the same boat. So it's definitely one of those things I think we're going to be speaking about here for sure over the coming weeks here on Sportswire Radio, as we always speak all things related to KOW. And I want to give a shout out to a couple of different people here that are watching. Obviously, our very good friends over in CCW are with us here. Of course, Colory Championship Wrestling, which, of course, continues to roll on with sellout after sellout. And, of course, our very good friend also from Wrestling Championship Entertainment, Craven Rage, is tuned in. Of course, Craven will be back with us on December the 3rd next weekend to speak about his own company. Of course, he is the reigning defending world champion of Wrestling Championship Entertainment, otherwise known as the Universal Grand Slam Wisconsinite Champion. So we'll definitely speak about that at another time. But speaking of the Vertigo ladder match, Lucy, this was a match that I was really intrigued by. You know, all the matches I was intrigued by, because ALP had got me fired up and I was roaring. I was ready to go. You know how much I love KOW and how much we love it on Sportswire Radio. But this match was so intriguing for a number of different reasons. Obviously, you mentioned the aforementioned the War Machine, Craig Collins. Ravy Davey was in this, and Ravy Davey's always an interesting guy. And you have somebody that's been on with us here a couple different times who you know very well, the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera, who, oh, by the way, is the Wrestle Island World Champion. And he's had a really, really big 2022 in his own right. And then we had, I guess, for one night, the returning Sheriff Steele, otherwise known as Commissioner Steele. And certainly that was a really, really intriguing dynamic with this match. But talk about how it all unfolded, and the fact the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera adds another feather to his cap here on Sportswire Radio. And this is going to be right before we see him in a few weeks with our friends over at Nonstop Action Wrestling, as he'll be in the ring there against somebody we know very well in Jackson Arrow. But talk about here in Barrow how we got to see the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera win the ladder for the Vertigo ladder match.
Yeah, like you said, this was one probably the most mismatched match. It had a lot of different elements going into it. It was actually the first match on the card. It was just the perfect way to kick off the show. It was, such a high quality ladder match, and it really set the tone for the evening. It was super fast paced. Everyone was putting their everything into it. Rivera decided to get on the mic before the bell rang and basically set his tone for the evening, which was, I'm better than all of you, and I know that I am.
Yeah, that's kind of his tone when he was with us here on Sportswire Radio, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, that's like his personality. And I guess
much,
it works
pretty
for
much.
him. I guess it works for him, so we can't really knock him for it.
No, he's been successful.
Yeah. He called Sheriff Steele corrupt for putting himself in the match. He said that Ravy Davey was pathetic. He said, Craig Collins, you need to calm down a bit. It was, the fans didn't like him, needless to say. So that angered everyone in the match. Not sure how smart that was by Lance, because it just angered everyone. Steele and Davey had to chase him down, and they threw him in the ring with Craig Collins, who was really angry about that point. And Collins ended up hoisting him up over his head and threw him straight back over the top rope, and straight onto Davey and Sheriff Steele. And then Craig Collins came in with a huge suicide dive to top that off.
Wow.
Craig Collins is not a small man.
Oh, I know. We've seen him in a number of different companies. He's he's no lightweight.
No, not at all. Just to see him, he always does this. He always pulls out some sort of gravity-defying move or two.
Well, they call him the War Machine for a reason,
Absolutely. That was such a high-paced start to the match, and it wasn't long before he did a moonsault as well. But it was Rivera wasn't afraid to go to the skies either, because Collins had built up all this momentum. He got a ladder. He was climbing up to the top of it really early on in the match, and Lance Rivera came in just like Edge and speared him straight off the ladder. So that was not Collins' moment, but this was really early in the match, so it was much of the same for the rest of it. We had Ravy Davy making some good attempts, but he was actually afraid of heights, so he struggled to get up the ladder.
Ah,
Sheriff Steele had to give him some encouragement, but it was a bit cruel of Sheriff Steele. He encouraged Davy to go up and then just toppled the ladder so that he fell off. But it was good to see Sheriff Steele back in the ring. I mean, he's not lost any of his athleticism or strength. He was,
In
you
fact,
know,
I think right now, listen, what you just said to me, in a way, is kind of ironic because I actually think now he's going to have more strength. He's going
yeah,
to have more quickness because the shape that he was in prior, the last time we saw him in the ring in KOW, to where he is now. I mean, he actually, to me, is more dangerous than he
yeah.
ever could be at any given time.
Oh, definitely. He's in amazing shape. So it was great to see him back in the ring and able to utilize that. I think maybe some people might have said, "Oh, well, he's not." You know, if you've not wrestled for a long time, then you might not be in ring condition. But he
I
didn't
think
show that
people
at
are
all.
watching Sheriff Steele, Commissioner Steele, in his videos because he
Yeah.
literally now, I mean, he's in shape that I don't think anybody could say they're in. I mean, he really has totally transformed himself and
Mm,
made him not only into a better person, but into a far, far stronger man. And certainly,
mhm.
I think that that translated quite a bit into the ring this past weekend.
It absolutely did. He was him and Collins were basically neck and neck, exchanging really firm punches. It was very violent, and you know he came quite close a few times to securing the briefcase, the vertical briefcase. But it was when Collins and Rivera were at the top of the two ladders, and Davey managed to push them both off. That Collins then took his opportunity to body slam Lance Rivera and Ravy Davy into uh, a ladder that was like against the turnbuckle. So that was absolutely brutal. Um, that was kind of where Collins' momentum peaked, and he managed to dive out the way of Sheriff Steele with a huge ladder that he was coming to hit him with, and then he German suplexed Sheriff Steele through a ladder. So he'd thrown everyone through a ladder pretty much. He headed up to the top of to grab the briefcase, but I think he kind of maybe got caught up in the moment and decided to, instead of grab the briefcase, to hit a frog splash from the top of the rope. I mean, from the top of the rope, from the top of the ladder. So instead of grabbing the briefcase, which was his perfect opportunity to do that, he didn't. So he went back up the ladder to go grab it again. And this is when Lance Rivera got up, took his opportunity to spring onto the other side of the ladder, take down Collins, and then grab the briefcase for himself. So this is what I was referring to earlier when I said that Collins was so close, but he didn't manage to do it. And Lance
Ah,
Rivera,
so he was there.
mm-hmm,
He could touch it. He could
yeah,
see it. But the Playboy Prince, Lance Rivera, in kind of his usual self,
yeah,
was able to find a way and get over the finish line and leave once again the War Machine, Craig Collins, on the short end of the stick. And that was something he really valued because that was going to get him back into a situation where just maybe he could win that world title. But instead, no, it's the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera who wins that briefcase and puts himself in a position to add eventually down the road more gold for himself.
exactly. And to be honest, I kind of saw this match ending in this sort of way where Lance Rivera would
You
jump
did
in.
mention that on Sportswire. You did mention that. I mean, in your most recent article that we talked about on Sportswire with RPD. So that's a good point.
That Lance Rivera would jump in at the very last possible moment and steal it for himself. I think he's smart like that. He's opportunistic, which I think is why he's going to be so great with the briefcase. Whether you like him or not, he's going to probably strike when we least expect it.
But
And
that's the kind of year he's had, though. I mean, you
yeah,
see the success that he's had in Wrestle On. Obviously, we've spoke about him with everything that's going on in Odyssey Pro Wrestling, and you think about some of the other companies that we've seen him in, and we're going to see him again here coming up on December the 17th in Nonstop Action Wrestling's Nuclear Winter Show. I mean, that's the kind of year that he's had, and I think that maybe this was the match that if I would have put the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera in a one-on-one, right, with all of these different wrestlers, Ravy Davy or the War Machine Craig Collins, the former world champion, and the legendary Sheriff Steele, I don't know if I would have put, or if you would have put in your predictions, the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera the favorite. But in a match like this where you
mhm,
have the potential where anything can happen, and also it's a 1 in 4 chance. And with the different components of the match, where some of them haven't been in the ring or been in this spot recently, or they're a little bit skeptical to go on top of the ladder and everything else,
yeah,
this was the kind of match where everything kind of broke perfectly for the Playboy Prince.
yeah. You're exactly right. He's just with this kind with so many different elements in the match. So four different competitors who are all got their own kind of skill set. It's perfect for Lance because he knows that he can let the other big beefy wrestlers kind of beat themselves up, beat each other up, and then he can jump in when they're least expecting it. So he was, for one thing, he was faster than Craig Collins getting up the ladder. So that played into it. He was able to kind of launch himself onto the ladder. He snuck out of nowhere. He kind of had that wherewithal to do that. It was just a match that was it was just perfect for him, and he took that opportunity. And yeah, I think he'll take the opportunity to capture the championship. I don't know when that'll be, but that's the point with Lance Rivera. You don't know when it's going to be.
Oh, no question about it. And certainly, of course, the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera adds a huge, huge win and a feather in his cap when it comes to KOW, and certainly we'll see if it results into more gold here with the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera as we are speaking with our very dear friend Lucy Simons. And of course, if you like what you hear from KOW, please give KOW a like on Facebook at Knockout W, KO_wrestling on Twitter, K_O_wrestling on Twitter, and of course, also support our very dear friend Lucy Simons, who does a phenomenal job recapping all the latest happenings here in the world of pro wrestling. Lucy Symes writes on Twitter, Lucy Syme01 on Instagram. Also, make sure you follow her page on Facebook because she knows wrestling like the back of her hand. She knows wrestling. Listen, Renee Paquette wishes they could have the knowledge that Lucy Simons has. Listen, Kathy Kelly, I mean, you name them all that are on. We see them, Sarah Schreiber. They have nothing on Lucy Simons. And I said that 2 years ago, and I'll continue to say that. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, the owner here of Sportswire Radio. And before we get back into the action here for KOW, I do want to make my announcement because unfortunately, we were supposed to have the Ronin, Brian Ainson, with us after you were going to be on the air with us, but he has unfortunately had a scheduling conflict, and we'll make sure to bring him back on a future show. And certainly we will be talking about his match shortly with the natural born fighter RP Davis. But we are going to have, I think, maybe a bigger guest, especially in KOW history, next week, next Wednesday, right around this time, 7 o'clock British Standard Time. And that is, of course, the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus, the returning Rick Marcus, the new KOW showcase winner. And what a shock that was. That was one of the biggest shocks, I think, in pro wrestling of 2022. The legendary Cumbrian Outlaw, of course, who we thought was pretty much never coming back in KOW. We had him more months ago, and we really didn't see this coming. I don't think anybody saw this coming. And yet, here he was. He was the mystery opponent against Keenan, and he found a way to win that championship. That championship, when I think of KOW history of Mount Rushmore, and especially that showcase trophy, who, of course, has been the example of that? That is the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus, arguably the greatest showcase winner, arguably one of the greatest in KOW history. He is going to talk about that and much, much more. So you are going to want to tune into that here, 7 o'clock next Wednesday on Sportswire Radio. Very, very excited to have the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus. But in the meantime, I am just as excited to have our very dear friend, Lucy Simons. And speaking of the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus, and that kind of segues perfectly into how the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus, was our new showcase winner against Keenan. And we spoke about this with ALP, and it seemed to me as if the Cumbrian outlaw Rick Marcus was nowhere to be found. I mean, I think he was even on RPD's stream with us toward the end and said, "I wish I'd be there, and I wish everybody well, a great show." And I saw no indication, no reasons, or anything that would have said to me the Cumbrian outlaw Rick Marcus is back. I would have thought, listen, if you would have told me Taylor West, if you would have told me even Ryan Grayson, King Ryan Grayson. I mean, if you would have told me anybody else but the Cumbrian outlaw Rick Marcus, I would have definitely said, yeah, you're right. But this one was totally out of left field. This was totally where no one saw it in Barrow, and you had a front row seat. And tell us. And I'm also curious what the reaction like was with the fans, because as we know, the history in Barrow between Rick Marcus and that audience is certainly a love-hate relationship. So talk about it and talk about our brand new showcase champion, the Cumbrian outlaw Rick Marcus, who's coming back with us next Wednesday on Sportswire Radio.
Well, I'm sure that Rick will be able to give you some answers, probably more answers than I can. I wasn't expecting to see him either. Yeah, like you said, I'd seen him posting and on your show being like, yeah, wish everyone well, gutted I can't be there. I don't know what happened. Maybe he was just pulling a sneaky on us. Or maybe he did it at the last minute, who knows. But it was great to see him back nonetheless. I mean, I think the fans were kind of definitely surprised, but 100% behind him because they don't like Keenan at all. So when they saw him come out, I think everyone was just, really happy to see him. I mean, Keenan obviously wasn't. Even before he knew who his opponent was, he said, he was on the mic complaining that the stipulation wasn't fair because he's had no time to prepare.
That's something we spoke about with ALP. We spoke about that scenario. I mean, you certainly read Keenan's mind, and certainly we did as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where Keenan was coming from, where he was complaining. It is to his disadvantage that he couldn't prepare, but you've got to expect these things as champion. But he said he had lots of confidence. He said, even though I haven't had time to prepare, the result's going to be the same. Keenan wins and keeps the showcase championship every time. So, it was for no.
He's had some big wins this year, by the way. I mean, RPD, we spoke about that match in depth in the past with RPD himself. And you look at the run that Keenan has had, obviously taking the title from Lucas Nia, and we'll certainly get into. I mean, it's been a very, very impressive year for Keenan.
Oh, absolutely. He's got reason to be confident. He's had some very, very big wins under his belt. And it's not to take anything away from him in the ring. He's obviously fantastic. But I think he definitely looked a little bit shaken when Rick Marcus came out. Rick Marcus, as ALP said on the mic, he reminded everyone he was the first ever and longest reigning showcase champion.
That's why I said he's to me the greatest showcase winner in company history, and he is that trophy, and he has said that here himself with us on Sportswire Radio.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to, like you said, think of anyone else when it comes to, greatest showcase champions. And I think Keenan kind of felt that in the atmosphere in Cloud9 when Rick Marcus came down to the ring. He looked shocked and he was frustrated with ALP for it. But he couldn't do anything about it. He was stuck in the match. He tried his best. Marcus was incredibly fired up. I mean, you could tell that he had been waiting for this moment to get back in the ring. He hit all of his hip tosses, his snap suplexes, the huge clotheslines within the opening few minutes of the match. He forced Keenan to go out of the ring. And he chopped him really hard. He was in front of all the fans, just absolutely basking in the atmosphere. But Keenan is a very, very smart wrestler. He reversed Marcus's momentum outside the ring, slammed Marcus on the hardest part of the ring, the ring apron, and then hit him with a leg drop out there. So after that, he kind of tried to wear Marcus down, which I think was like his best chance really of winning the match, was just not let Marcus build any sort of momentum or strength whatsoever. Because Marcus was really feeding off all the fans. I think that might be one of his greatest strengths, is just to be able to get the crowd into the match and pull himself back. And he actually did manage to do that despite all of Keenan's efforts. He hit a massive spine buster. It looked really, really painful. And followed that up with, lots more offense. Keenan was doing his best to try and fight back. he's a really fast, kind of agile wrestler. I think he tried to use that against Rick Marcus, but unfortunately it didn't. For him, it didn't work. And Marcus's spear, which could obviously hit out of nowhere, managed to land, and that was it for the win. I mean, it was a fantastic match, and I think I was actually quite surprised to see Keenan lose his showcase championship because, like you said, he was really dominant with it, and he got
He
some
had a
huge
really good run this year
wins.
as champion, and he really, I think, in a lot of ways, was almost. In some ways, he goes under the radar, but in a lot of
Mm.
ways, he really, I think, exemplified what that trophy means and what that championship should be in KOW. That's why I was kind of surprised that he was going to lose here because I thought just everything that he's done to keep that trophy, he still would have found a way.
No, that's exactly what I thought as well. I guess on the night when you're not prepared for the absolute powerhouse that you're up against, Rick Marcus has all this kind of energy behind him because he's returning. No one thought he was going to return. He basically said, "No, I'm not coming back." He came back, so all of that behind him, it was obviously hard to keep down. Um, but interestingly, that wasn't the end of the drama for that match, and even though
Oh, I know that. I heard about that. So you tell us what
Mhm.
exactly that drama was.
I mean, I'm sure this was something you were going to talk about with your guest
Oh,
later
yes,
on
we were.
tonight, but he's not. He's had a scheduling conflict, so he's not going to be able to defend himself. I'm
Nope.
sure he's not going to be very happy with me. I'm referring to Brian Anderson, of course.
Yep.
So,
The Ronan
you know,
Bryan Anderson. Yep. Yep.
Rick Marcus was obviously basking in his victory. Um, the fans were really behind him. It was a great moment. I think his family was in the crowd, so that was who hadn't seen him wrestle for such a long time. Um, so as he was really distracted, I think, and this kind of allowed Brian Anderson to appear on the stage. And I don't know why he would do this. And he basically launched a brutal attack on Rick Marcus for God knows what reason. I don't know what reasons there are behind anything that Brian Anderson does. And we'll get onto this, but earlier in the night, he had used his brass knuckles to defeat RPD basically, and he had these at the ready. He was ready to start beating down on Rick Marcus, but luckily RPD was out to make the save for
Thank
his.
God. Thank God
Yeah,
the natural born fighter RP Davis made that save because could you have imagined what could have happened to the Cumbrian outlaw Rick Marcus there? I mean, we might not have seen him for the
yeah,
foreseeable future going into 2023 and beyond.
absolutely. I mean, yeah, Brian Anderson was hell bent on absolutely knocking him out. So yeah, the reception for RPD when he came out was very loud, and I think the fans were just relieved. I guess this just shows that RPD and Brian Anderson still have unfinished business. Um, Maybe we'll see, RPD and Rick Marcus in a tag team, Born Ready, facing Brian Anderson and God knows who. But wouldn't be against that. That sounds like a good match, and I think
I'll
Brian
tell you what. Do you know something that we don't know here in KOW that the possibility could be there for just maybe the Born Ready's return against the Ronan Bryan Anderson and a partner of his choice? I mean, certainly there could be a whole list of people you could speculate on, but the Ronan Bryan Anderson doesn't seem like he has many friends, though. I mean, he's not a
Anderson.
guy that necessarily teams well with people. We've seen that in the past, whether it's with the
Yeah.
likes of the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera and a long list of people that he's been in the ring with. So I don't really know the possibility of who exactly would team with him unless it's maybe Keenan. I mean, Keenan would kind of
Mm.
make sense. I mean, because obviously Keenan had just lost the showcase trophy. I mean, that would sort of make sense. But I mean, certainly the Cumbrian outlaw Rick Marcus does win and kind of fitting here, 10-year anniversary show. And he takes a trophy that certainly I think, again, when I think of KOW history, he is that trophy. And certainly, again, still weird to me, Lucy, when you think about KOW and the fans being behind the Cumbrian outlaw Rick Marcus, because we know the history, we know the wars he had with Sheriff Steele, and to think now everything's come full circle and the Cumbrian outlaw Rick Marcus is kind of beloved now in Barrow.
Yeah, he is. I think that when you put anyone against a member of the underclass, Barrow automatically likes them.
True.
There
Good point.
was a lot of history, but I think Rick Marcus kind of he showed not at the last show, but the show before that when he got on the mic and basically said, "Listen, I'm not going to come back. really obviously lied. But
Yeah, we
in
had
saying
him on. Listen, we had the interview with him right after his match with RPD, and it was almost like it was a goodbye. It almost seemed
yeah,
legitimately like this is it. Like, and we haven't seen him much in pro wrestling throughout the year, really. So it's been very quiet with the Cumbrian Outlaw this year.
yeah, it has. I think maybe that's why the fans got behind him because they were like, "Good, we don't want to lose you." His farewell speech was obviously it was very grateful for the fans, and I
It was
think
emotional. It was because we
it
were
was
emotional
very
here when he spoke about it. Very emotional.
yeah, it was super emotional. I think it's hard. It was hard for the fans to kind of hold a grudge after that, and then for him to come back against Keenan, it was like the perfect storm of everyone getting behind him, and especially if he's got RPD on his side, um, that's sure fan favorite. I
Oh,
mean,
and listen, that relationship that those two have had, I mean, that speaks volumes in the friendship and what they mean to each other. We've had them both on here at the same time, and we've heard them both talk about one another in different spots. And there's a certain relationship that those two have. I mean, I've put it on the level of Hogan and Savage when they were on seeing eye to eye with each other. I mean, Sting and Luger, if you want to go that far. I mean, you can go along. Maybe Moxley and Danielson right now. I mean, there's a certain relationship that those two have, and certainly thank God the natural born fighter RP Davis saved his best friend, his dear, dear, dear friend, the Cumbrian Outlaw Rick Marcus, our brand new KOW showcase winner, and certainly we'll see what happens there. And something tells me we have not heard the last by a long shot with that, and that transitions perfectly into the Ronin Brian Aidenson and the natural born fighter RP Davis. I had a whole thing planned for this, Lucy, because we were going to have Aidenson on. RPD came on for a few minutes with us and basically said, like, look, I'm going to take care of business. You won't have the Ronin Brian Aidenson on Monday. You won't have him on because I'm going to make sure he can't speak, he can't talk, I'm going to deliver. But yet we find out here that we're not getting the Ronin Brian Aidenson because of a scheduling conflict, but we do find, unfortunately, that the Ronin Brian Aidenson found a way to one up the score here. When it came to the natural born fighter, RP Davis, this was a match that really has been quite a while in the making for a rematch. And I do think, and I said this with ALP, Lucy, I really think that this probably was, in my opinion, the best feud in KOW this year. It was easily the most personal. And I think it's a feud that I think basically after what you said, it's far from over.
yeah, I think it's probably might be my favorite KOW feud of the year. They met in their very first match, which was such a explosive match that basically kind of cemented RPD as a mainstay in KOW. And I think
Yep.
Anderson was so frustrated that it wasn't him that he couldn't possibly let it go until he got another one-on-one match. And I think they obviously, because they know each other so well, they were able to bring this forward in the match. I mean, they both kickstarted the match with such high energy, and they were dodging each other's attacks. I mean, Edison managed to dodge about 3 Superman punches. So he'd been practicing, and it paid off.
Well, we spoke about that. We spoke about that proponent. Could it be where Aidenson's going to find a way to lock him in, or the Superman punches are going to be too much for the Ronin? And apparently, the Ronin, like you said, did his homework.
He definitely did. I mean, it was very intense match. It was really violent. I mean, knockout or tap out kind of to me seems more technical. I mean, you've got these two martial artists in the ring, but for the first part at least, it was more about kind of brawling. I think because they ended up going up the stairs to the balcony area. They were
Ooh,
fighting
I could
all
picture that
over.
balcony. I could picture that balcony right now in Cloud9. Boy,
Yeah, they were
that.
fighting all over it. Luckily, no one got pushed off the balcony in this match. But Brian Edison did end up getting thrown down the stairs. He fell unceremoniously down those stairs.
Oof, that's gotta hurt.
Yeah, it looked like it really did hurt. And that kind of gave RPD some momentum. He then seemed like he wanted to end the match, so they got back in the ring and he locked in an armbar. But Edison fought back with submissions of his own, so then it became this kind of mat wrestling, grappling, quite technical. And they exchanged loads of holds and fought back and forth. And there was quite a lot of near misses with the submissions, it looked like, but neither of them wanted to give up. I think they were in a lot of pain, but their pride kind of got in the way of them staying down for the 10 count or tapping out. But saying that, Aidenson did actually tap out at one point, but it was outside the ring. And the referee said, listen, it has to be inside the ring. And RPD was really frustrated. I think all the fans were really frustrated. So he pushed Aidenson back in the ring, and he was quick to go for the Superman punch again. But like I said, Aidenson managed to avoid it. This was his opportunity to pull out these brass knuckles. And I don't know where he got them from. I don't know how he managed to hide them for this whole match. This was his opportunity to use them, apparently.
Maybe William Regal gave him the brass knuckles, because if anybody watched AEW this past weekend, maybe that was certainly, who knows, maybe William Regal, who has a relationship with the Natural Born Fighter, RP Davis, maybe from afar he turned on RPD. Who knows?
Tom, that is one hell of a conspiracy theory, and I think I can get behind it.
Oh, we'll make sure we post it on Instagram and Twitter tomorrow. We'll make sure that RPD hears this one. I'm sure Mr. Aidenson will have a thought on that as well.
But it is interesting that you mentioned William Regal, because he's quite known for using his brass knuckles. And I've been listening to William Regal's podcast, and he talked about this. He said, "I don't use the brass knuckles because I need to win. I use them because I can, and I want to hurt you." And I'm not sure where. I want to hear from Brian Aidenson why he did this, because
I wanted to hear from him too, and I think the world wanted to hear from him, but unfortunately, he has a scheduling conflict. What a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll have to try and catch him for an interview or something, or you can get him on one of
We're gonna try to get him. We're gonna try to get him back on next week. That's certainly something that we still want him on.
Yeah, we need to find out, because listen, I don't think he needed those brass knuckles to beat RPD, but I think maybe in this moment he thought that he did, because he knew that he tapped out outside the ring just a few seconds earlier. Maybe he got desperate, and I'm not trying to discredit Aidenson. He'll say that I'm a biased journalist. Me and him don't.
He has certainly had no love for you. We've had him on a couple times. He has shown no love for you at all, and I know you know that very well.
No, I know where I stand with Brian Aidenson, and I have been skeptical of his excuses in the past, but I really don't think he needed those brass knuckles to win. I think he needed a moment to recuperate, and he could have won this match by submission or something. I don't think he needed the brass knuckles. Like William Regal says, you use them because you want to hurt someone, not because you need them. So maybe that was it. He really wanted to hurt RPD. And yeah, he clobbered RPD firmly in the jaw with them. And RPD did actually get up before the 10 count. But, brass knuckles to the face, you're not going to be able to fight the match after that. He was discombobulated, and Aidenson locked in a chokehold, and RPD was out cold. To RPD's credit, he didn't tap out. The referee called the match because he was knocked out. So
the referee didn't do that, and I know sometimes our referees, we give a hard time here in KOW. We've certainly had our issues with different referees, whether it's Logan, the War Machine, Craig Collins in the past, but there was no choice here. If the referee did not stop that match, RPD could seriously have been hurt, and we might be talking about RPD right now on life support. We might be talking about him in critical condition. I'm dead serious into the fact of what could have happened there. He had no choice.
Yeah, absolutely. The referee had no choice. I mean, I think RPD, even if he's frustrated about the way it ended, I'm sure he'll say, yeah, the referee did the right thing. Aidenson knows what he's doing. He knows how to lock in a chokehold and knock someone out, and he did that. To his credit, he did that. I don't see. This is why I say he didn't need to use the brass knuckles. He could have done that. I think he could have done it without them, but why he decided to do that, who knows?
Well, I mean, listen. I mean, maybe that was something in his mind. He knew that RPD was going to keep going to the same wheelhouse. He was going to go for the same things, and maybe that was something that he felt was going to give him the upper hand. I don't know. I mean, it was certainly something that we wanted to speak about, but it was funny because when we spoke with RPD, we had mentioned how big of a match that this was going into 23 for him, to put him on the springboard into maybe title contention, or maybe getting himself into winning a title in 23. But yet, to me, I think what we've learned regardless now is that the Ronin Brian Aidenson, I think, uses this as a springboard. I mean, certainly it does seem like we haven't heard the last of RPD and Aidenson, but certainly Aidenson's actions toward Rick Marcus would tell you that he's eventually got gold on his mind as well. So that's why this match to me was so important for whoever came out with the
Mhm.
W.
Yeah, definitely. I think Edison kind of had something to prove, having kind of gone through all the things he's gone through with RPD, to play the mind games that he has, and to kind of say to RPD, look, I'm the better fighter. I think between these two, it is about kind of proving who has the physical dominance over the other one. And yeah, it is definitely a springboard for Edison going forward in his KOW career. I mean,
I think it was a win he needed. He needed a win
yeah,
here.
yeah, he did need a win, and he knew that, and he knew that to kind of keep being relevant in KOW, he needed the win over RPD. RPD has already had a championship opportunity in KOW.
Keenan.
Exactly, and Brian Ensign didn't. I think he was very bitter about that, and he
And
thinks,
even being in the tournament against Big Guns Joe, I mean, listen, RPD came up short to the eventual world champion here. So you kind of felt like this is what the Ronan Bryan Nathanson had said with us here on Sportswire, was to the fact that he had not been given the opportunities. RPD is kind of like the golden boy. RPD is the guy that comes in here. It's RPD. RPD. I mean, we love saying RPD here on Sportswire as well, but I think that's why I think in a way that he might have had extra incentive. He might have felt that he had to dig deep and do something to the level. We don't condone his actions. We don't support that, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it should have been like, look, if you can make RPD tap out, if you can make him where, you know what, he can't go and he can't make it past the 10 count, and you do it on your own accord, fine. If you want to make sure that you knock him out, like in RPD's case, don't cheat. But unfortunately, he did those things here, and something tells me here we have not heard the last of that feud, as we are here with Lucy Simons, pro wrestling journalist extraordinaire. If you like what you hear from Lucy Simons, please continue to support her on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Twitter, Lucy Simons writes. Also, Lucy Sim01 as well on Instagram. Also, if you're on Facebook, please like her page as well. She has always been one of our favorites here on Sportswire Radio. And of course, our friends over at KOW, please continue to make sure you support Knockout W on Facebook, KO_wrestling on Twitter, K_O_wrestling on Instagram, and continue to support this great company, which has had arguably its greatest show in the company's history. It was its most successful when it comes to gate, when it comes to attendance, merchandise, all those things. So certainly business is booming. We want to thank everybody that has supported KOW, but also, most importantly, thank the talent for their part in being in part of one of the, I think, again, one of the best shows of 2022 in pro wrestling. And Lucy Simons was there, and she's talking about it here with us for a little while longer. And Lucy, that brings us here to the main event. It was the match that might have had more emotion than any other match, despite all the things that we say. Think about it, because we spoke about the Vertigo match with Sheriff's return. We spoke about Marcus's return. We spoke about RPD and Aidenson. And we even spoke about the Underclass and the Freak Show. But yet, Big Guns Joe and Lucas Neon. There was so much on the line here, Lucy, because obviously this is it. This is Lucas Neon's last shot. It was his last shot at the title. We saw that emotional exchange between him and Sheriff Steele. We know Lucas Neon and his history with this company, what this company has meant to him, everything that he and Barrow, that relationship that they have. And Lucy, he was finally able to win it after all the things he's gone through, losing the showcase, losing match after match. But now he is our new KOW standard bearer. He is our world champion. And talk about it, and talk about what it meant to you and everyone else that was there in Barrow.
It really was one of the best moments that I've ever experienced in wrestling, like ever. I
Wow.
mean, I think ever since I've predicted for maybe about a year, maybe even longer, that Lucas Neon, he's going to get the heavyweight
You
championship.
did talk about it. You did talk about it. You sure
Um,
did.
I've always said that if he's obviously he was an amazing showcase champion, but I just felt like he was destined for bigger and better things, and I knew that, especially when 2-Bit was in the company, these two had such a bit of rivalry.
Oh, we spoke about that. Was the
Mm,
2019 ladder match. That was the match of the year, and the
mhm.
emotion that we saw there with the fan base in Barrow getting behind Lucas when he finally won the showcase trophy.
Yeah, seeing him he had this quite a really, really difficult journey to get there. Um, and him and Two Bit had an epic rivalry. Two Bit stepped away from the company, and it kind of seemed like, okay, this is Lucas Neon's moment then to win this tournament, the Road to Gold tournament, and actually win the trophy and the championship. So for Big Guns Joe to pull out the steel chair, to not allow him to win, that was just a big blow to him. And to get that final opportunity, he obviously deserved a rematch, but there was so much pressure that this was understandably his very last opportunity. And I can understand Sheriff Steele making that decision, Commissioner Steele, in that role, kind of saying, listen, this is your last chance. I sort of get it. And the pressure was on for Lucas Neon so much. I mean, from the moment I sat down in my seat, it was all anyone around me could talk about. Like, what if? I hope Lucas Neon wins, was what everyone was saying. But what if he doesn't? What's going to happen? Oh, my kids will be heartbroken. My kids will be crying. And I was like, yeah, me too. Basically, Barrow was going to riot if he didn't walk away with that
Yeah,
championship.
no, listen, and at this point, I think there would be a lot of good reasons as to why, especially toward what he's meant there. And you
Mm,
had to think the pressure had to have been on Lucas. I mean, just because of everything that we just spoke about. I mean, it was amazing that he was able to perform the way he did.
absolutely. Yeah, I think you could maybe tell there was a lot of pressure on him, but that didn't affect his performance. So he used the energy of the crowd to his advantage, obviously. Um, I think Big Guns Joe is one of those characters that sometimes people in KOW love to hate him, but it wasn't like that anymore. It was firm hatred because he obviously what he did at the last show, and he was
Hmm.
suddenly really serious. He was carrying the trophy and the belt, and he looked like a champion. And I think everyone they were so behind Lucas Neon that Joe was frustrated at that. So these two really took it to each other. Um, and Joe tried to play mind games with Lucas Neon. He was able to catch up with Lucas when Neon tried to go up to the second rope and do his signature cross body, but Joe kind of stopped him 3 times. He managed to stop him. When Neon finally managed to hit it, Joe hit him with a power bomb. So Joe kind of seemed that one step ahead. That didn't actually quiet down the crowd at all. It kind of just spurred everyone even more to be behind him. I mean, there was literally not one single moment during that match where the crowd wasn't chanting for Lucas Neon. It was never ever quiet, which I think definitely was an advantage for Neon. He seemed to be struggling, but he always kicked out. He always fought back from Joe's offense. It was really high energy despite everything that Neon was up against. Um, but amongst the chaos, the referee ended up getting taken out at one point. So this is when Neon used this opportunity to hit his cutter, which was for the win. But the fans were counting to 3, but there was no referee to count it. So that was really frustrating for the fans. That was
Sounds like the RPD Aidenson match there, or at least with the tap out, and we were kind of waiting for it, and Aidenson's tapping out, but the ref is like, well, I mean, it don't count.
exactly. It was really, really frustrating, and I think fans feared the worst at that moment because Joe took advantage of. So Neon, good natured, he was checking on the referee, and Joe snuck in, beat him up, locking the Boston crab. That was really painstaking because Neon was doing everything he could to get to the bottom rope, and Joe wasn't letting him. But he didn't tap out, and I think Joe got really frustrated that he would not tap out, and he started antagonizing Neon, basically saying, "Why won't you tap out? Just give up." And then Neon used that opportunity to go for a quick roll up. It wasn't for the win though, but that was I think that might have kind of
Turn the tide a little bit.
it turned the tide because I think it psyched out Big Guns Joe because he realized that actually Lucas Neon's not down and out. Um,
Right.
and because actually the referee ended up going down again, and this was how basically the moment that Joe thought, okay, how I'm going to beat him is going to be with a steel chair again. So he went underneath the ring, he reached for the steel chair, and he used it on Lucas Neon behind the referee's back. But still, Neon kept on going. I don't really know how he managed to do this. And Joe got even more frustrated. He was like, right, I need a different weapon. He went to grab the championship belt, but Neon was able to dodge it. And I think he kind of used that momentum to build up into his finisher again, and it was completely out of nowhere. Joe wasn't expecting it, and after being hit with 2, there was nothing he could do. And it was because the referee had been knocked out so many times. It was quite a slow count, or at least it might have. It just seemed maybe it just seemed it to me because the anticipation was so high. But yeah, the referee counted to 3, and that was it. That was the end of the match. And I think you would struggle to find a reaction louder than that anywhere in the country, or maybe anywhere in the world, for any kind of championship victory. I mean, it was. I think the fans they didn't doubt him at any moment, but he'd come so close to winning and losing it throughout the match that when the end actually finally came, it was quite unbelievable. I mean, the excitement and the emotion was just through the roof. Lucas Neon's entire family was present. Even his little baby daughter came in the ring with him. That was just such a sweet moment. There was confetti. I mean, some of the members KOW roster came out to congratulate him as well. So clearly, it was just a fantastic payoff, and everyone was so happy for him.
I mean, we've talked about a lot of historic moments in KOW, but this felt, and this is saying a lot, this felt like this really added to the emotion. There was a lot of stakes involved here. Lucas Neon is Barrow as anybody could ever be. I mean, you think about the different wrestlers that have come here, but he's kind of like the next guy. He's kind of like the
Mm.
next Sheriff Steele or the next Taylor West or the next Craig Collins or even Marcus to an extent. I mean, he's kind of the next guy. So in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like that this added to it and the emotion. I mean, obviously him having, him being a new father not too long ago, and his father obviously being a part of KOW, his relationship with Steele, his relationship obviously with ALP and everybody else. I mean, he's seen KOW since he's a baby. So this is kind of in a lot of ways really adds to the moment here.
Oh, 100%. Like you said, it's a family affair for him, with his dad being involved. He's been involved in KLW since the very start, as a fan, and then going to the academy and kind of having to prove himself through that, and being in so many history-making feuds, being in that kind of, I guess you could call it like the golden era of the KLW academy. You've got 2-Bit, Will Carter, and Lucas Neon. So much success between the 3 of them, and yeah, it was just felt like it was building to this kind of story ending, history making moment. And I think everyone, no matter kind of like the fans in the room, whether they'd been in KOW since the start or if this was their first show, you can't not get behind Lucas Neon. He's from Barrow. He's got this energy about him. He's kind of always got that underdog type.
How about the music and the lights?
Oh yeah, absolutely. His entrance is amazing.
I think it's one of the best around in all of wrestling. I always get fired up when I hear that music. And they got the dancing and the glasses, and
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just something about that music and that entrance from Lucas Neon, and I think the fans in Barrow agree.
Oh yeah, they love it. I mean, kids and adults alike can't help but get behind him. Um, you've got kids with like the neon lights and the masks and the shirts, the wrestling buddies. They absolutely adore him, and you cannot blame them. He puts his everything into the ring every time. He's so charismatic, and clearly the fans mean the world to him as well. It's not like it's not a one-sided thing. He's so grateful for all the fans. You could definitely tell. He took his time to celebrate with all the fans. So to see him as champion of the company, I think will bring like a level of positivity to KOW that we've maybe not had since 2-Bit with his really long reign and all of that kind of.
But that was a different type of rapport that he had with the fans. Lucas
Yeah,
Neon, it's a whole nother level. It's a whole different side
yeah,
of the coin. No pun intended. I mean, that's why to me, I think it's so special with what Lucas had. Because again, the odds. Listen, this was pretty much it. This was the last shot. We've seen
yeah,
him lose as much as he's had since he lost the showcase trophy. We saw the emotions between him and Steele. We spoke about this with ALP. This was pretty much his back against the wall. His family was there. His little daughter. I mean, think about it. his dream, he said this himself this past weekend. His dream was always to be a world champion and to be the KOW world champion. He's accomplished his dream in a lot of ways, Lucy.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't want to make the comparison, but it was almost like Shawn Michaels WrestleMania 12. The boyhood dream has finally been achieved, and it did kind of feel like that in some ways. Or Daniel Bryan, when he was Daniel Bryan, when he won the world title himself for the first time, it felt like that moment, that special moment that it's arrived. He has arrived now in KOW. I mean, that's kind of how I feel. Maybe it's the facial hair now. Maybe it's just a
Mhm.
whole different level that he's on. But I mean, I kind of feel like now Lucas Neon has finally arrived.
Definitely. I mean, it's like we've seen him grow through KOW. I mean, me and him are the same age, but I feel it's weird. I look at him, I feel so proud. It's like he's kind of grown up through KOW. He's like turned from a
Yes.
boy into a man.
He
And
said that here with us. He watched his father. He watched Steele. He watched Marcus. He watched all of these people. He went to the Academy shows. He has been. I'm not sure if this is 100% accurate, but I think he's been to almost every single KOW show in the company's history.
yeah, I think that too. I thought that before. I think he might have. There's a very good chance he's been to all of the shows, if not, most of them, 90% of them. So yeah, and Barrow is his hometown. It's where he grew up. It's where he lives now. So I think he's inspiring the next generation of KOW talent as well. I think there's so many young kids who will be so inspired by him in the crowd from Barrow, and yeah, it's definitely felt like he's arrived. He's proven what I think we all kind of knew, but we had to. He's always kind of been held back from the championship for one reason or another, and to finally see him come on top of all that and come away with that championship, it was just like I said before, it was just such a feel good moment, such like one
It's
of the
one
best.
of those moments that you're going to remember where you were, that time, that day, that place, everything else in between. So, I mean, it's going to be one of those moments. And I think in KOW history, you're going to remember that moment. Of course, obviously, everybody coming out afterwards and just the overall atmosphere. And, I almost have to ask you, I mean, is this the greatest KOW show in company history? I mean, it's obviously the most successful in terms of just attendance and everything else. But I mean, is this going to be one of those or the most successful in the company's history? You think?
I mean, I, I, as I only came into the company 3 years ago, I can't defiantly say from my own experience, right? But I think it was the favorite one that I've been to personally,
Okay. Okay.
and I think LLP has said it's quite possibly the greatest KOW show because
That's
to
why I
have
was
an
asking you that
anniversary.
question because when he
Yeah.
said that, that's very, very strong words from ALP. Because of course, ALP. I mean,
Mhm.
he's been in this company more than anybody else. So for
Yeah.
him to say it, it's got to be a question to ask or to think about.
I think with Lucas Neon coming out on top, it's one of those top 10 moments ever. So it definitely does. I mean, a 10th anniversary show is it's such a big milestone, hitting a decade of wrestling in Barrow. It is such an achievement that I think ALP and everyone involved knew that it had to be a huge card. But the wrestlers really delivered as well. From top to bottom, it was just a fantastic night of wrestling. Um, Me and even my non-wrestling fan boyfriend said, he sometimes says, "Oh, that dragged on a bit" when I take him to a wrestling show. But he said that was just amazing. All the matches were amazing, and like we've said, every match could have been a main event easily in its own right. But the main event was just one of the very best matches and finished with one of the best moments ever. I mean, like you said, you'll never forget it. KOW fans will never ever forget it.
That's for sure. And I want to give a couple of comments a mention. I want to give our good friend Shelby Sinar, who says good evening. Of course, Shelby is over from our friends at GT Ministries and Blackheart Wrestling, so I want to acknowledge her. My very dear friend, who I used to sit in a section with the New York when I was a New York Islanders season ticket holder, of course, Jimmy Gorman gives me a face emoji and certainly hello and happy Thanksgiving to you. Happy U.S. Thanksgiving to you, Jimmy, and you and your family as well. And certainly I hope to be there at UBS Arena in your section one of these days very, very soon. And also we'll not bring up the Islanders because they've lost a couple of games in a row. So that'll be a topic we'll mention a different time. And we had, of course, our friend from CCW tuned in, and I had somebody else tuned in, but they're put on a timeout because they're trying to be clever and put different comments, and we'll move off from that. But I want to ask you then this question before I get to closing thoughts from you. Where do you think we go from here going into next year in KOW?
Well, I think there needs to be a very worthy opponent to face Lucas Neon for the KOW Heavyweight Championship. I mean,
well, who is that person?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for you right now. I mean, there's a lot of possible contenders in KOW. I mean, I think maybe Nightmare or Will Carter might say, "Well, we want an individual shot. We've been so successful as a tag team. We deserve our."
Well, you think Carter and Neon have a history with each other? You would think that that's a possibility.
Yeah, definitely. And then you've got all these returning new faces as well. You've got people who are trying to make a name for themselves, such as Brian Anderson and Craig Collins, just two men who have really trying to make, really desperate to kind of get at the top, who might have a case for a championship match. I think Keenan even would probably have a good shout.
That'll be a banger, and we obviously know that there's some unfinished business there between those two, and Keenan certainly, if he doesn't go back to the showcase trophy and try to reclaim that, I mean, he does have a win over Lucas Neon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that will probably give him quite a strong argument for his championship match, but I don't know what Commissioner Steele's going to have in mind. I don't even know if Commissioner Steele is going to be wrestling again. Maybe that's just a taste of things to come.
Well, that was something so interesting because we saw in the video for him returning. I mean, it seemed like I thought it was for one match, possibly one night only, but we don't know. It's an open-ended question now because Rick Marcus is back. I mean, they seem like they've patched things up. I mean, I guess there's a possibility. I mean, I guess it's, I don't know.
No, I don't know either. I mean, I think, he's that video kind of showed. He's in amazing shape. He's in the shape of his life. So I think he's probably physically and mentally capable of getting back in the ring. But it'd be difficult to juggle the responsibilities of commissioner and being in ring as well.
I think it would be in the locker room. I think a lot of people in the locker room would be very skeptical of that. You would see, again, some of the things that Brian Aidenson has spoke about or Keenan has spoke about or other people, the underclass, and to an extent. So I think that there would be certainly some things there that I think that at the end of the day that you would kind of give some credence to and some weight to. So maybe that is certainly a possibility. Then we'll have to find out. We'll obviously see where the underclass go from here. Obviously, now that they're the tag team champions. So kind of a mixed bag for the underclass this past show. Keenan loses the showcase, but Decker and Logan do win the tag team titles. Decker is going to come back to Sportswire Radio very soon, so we'll get Decker's thoughts. Decker always has something to say, and so we'll see what happens with the underclass going forward. What happens with the War Machine, Craig Collins? The Playboy Prince Lance Rivera wins the briefcase, so he's still a factor in the title picture. Then we've got this RPD and Aidenson situation. Now, is it now sort of added into the dynamic with the Cumbrian Outlaw Rick Marcus, who has returned, and now he has won the trophy that is pretty much the trophy that he has owned and dominated throughout his career. So many questions here going into 2023 with KOW. Obviously, we're going to speak about all of that with ALP coming up here soon. Aidenson will be back, and there'll be many, many others that'll come back. We mentioned Andre Decker. RPD will always be near around the corner, and we'll speak about all of that when it comes to KOW. But I did want to ask you one more question before closing thoughts. Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society, I know we're not the president anymore, but how are things there, and anything you'd like to promote toward that?
Well, the new president, Dan, is doing an absolutely fantastic job. I mean, I'm doing my master's degree now, and I took a step back.
I saw that. I saw you doing the thesis. I saw you got like a big paper you're working on, and I mean, boy, I remember when I was in college, they would say, "Here, Lucy," and they would give you a certain time, and it was like half of what you had to write, and I'd be like struggling up until that last week to pull it off, and yet you've got a master's program to go through.
Yeah, I got a lot of essays due, a lot of words to write.
God help you.
I'm really, to be fair, I'm really enjoying it, and I'm glad the society is in good hands with Dan.
Good.
He's doing a
Good.
fantastic job.
Good.
We've had some really fun meetings. We've got a few new members. Definitely go give them some support on social media. It's I think it's at Lancaster Wrestle Sock on Instagram and Lancaster University Pro Wrestling site on Facebook. If anyone happens to be listening from Lancaster, probably, maybe, I don't know, go join the society. It's great. I mean, you don't even have to like wrestling to enjoy it. It's
Well,
just
because you guys are all such warm and inviting, you might actually become more intelligent by joining you guys, because you guys are all going to be like Rhodes Scholars. You guys are all going to do things that are going to be so big. Obviously, I know you're going to still be in the wrestling world always, but I mean, you guys are all just, phenomenal individuals, phenomenal people. You have a great time. Everybody's so welcoming and so diverse with what you guys do. And I think that that's why everybody needs to follow the Lancaster Wrestling University Society at Lancaster Wrestle Society. So that's Lancaster Wrestle SOC, as you mentioned, SOC, LUPW. So please make sure you follow the company. Obviously, of course, this the 2022 Equality and Diversity Award winners. Also, there's a link tree where you can get more information on the society and all the great things that you guys have to offer. There's a shop if you want to buy things. There's also Facebook. There's also Twitter as well. So please make sure you support Lucy and the group. Everything they do for the community certainly speaks for itself. And we're always, always so excited to have Lucy on. It's been a while. We certainly made sure to speak as much as we could about everything. I know that you've got a voice, you've got papers to write that are kind of on the ropes right now. So I'm going to give you the floor. I'm going to give you some closing thoughts. Anything you want to plug, share, say, and I can't thank you enough, Lucy, and the floor is yours.
Well, I guess actually I think this will be a good chance for me to talk about how yes, Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society has a link tree where you can go visit our Redbubble shop. We have some awesome merchandise. It's inspired by the Bullet Club, but it says Lancaster Club. It's a picture of a duck. Basically, all of our profits for that go to charity, so we don't get any money for that. We have LGBTQ designs, which you can use to show your support for Transgender Awareness Month. We've got transgender flag designs. All the proceeds from that go to Stonewall, and all the proceeds from our original black and red and white designs, that goes to Mind, the mental health charity, which I think is just so important. So if anyone wants to spot an awesome cause, get an awesome piece of merch, go ahead and do that. And yeah, be sure to go like my Facebook page if you're interested in anything else that I've got to say about wrestling. My full show report for the 10th anniversary show, KOW, will be out very, very soon. So keep an eye out for that. If you were there or you wanted to relive it or you didn't catch it, all the details are there. So that'll be uploaded very soon, and you'll find out when if you go like my Facebook page, which is Lucy Simons Pro Wrestling Journalist. And I'm also on Twitter and talk sometimes about wrestling and lots of other nonsense. It's at Lucy Sim Wright. And yeah, that's about it, I think. Thank you, Tom.
And Lucy Simon 1 on Instagram as well. So make sure you follow Lucy. Lucy's always been one of my favorites. And like I continue to say, Renee Paquette, Sarah Schreiber, you name them, Kathy Kelly, none of them have. Kayla Braxton have nothing on Lucy Simons. And I want to give a shout out to a very dear friend of us here on Sportswire Radio. There's, of course, John Gonzalez of the Sports Authorities Group. And John always tunes into all of our shows. He's always a part of our American Friday shows, which you can hear 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:30 a.m. UK time. And he says, nobody promotes wrestling better than myself. I don't know about that. Lucy's in the wrestling business, and she does a lot better job than I do. We just try to recap it. But I do thank John for all of his support and friendship over the past year or so. So thank you, John, for all that you do. And I'm also a part of the Sports Authorities group, so please make sure you follow the group on Facebook at the Sports Authorities. I believe it's 4,000 plus members or so that are in the group, and there's a number of people from Sportswire Radio that are a part of it, moderators, so please make sure you follow them. And also want to make an announcement that next Thursday, in addition to Wednesday, the Cumbrian Outlaw Rick Marcus is coming on. Speaking of champions, we will have on the GT Ministries World Champion, Disciple, who has a history with the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera. I don't know if you know this, Lucy, and also a history with the Ronin Brian Adenson. He is going to be with us because he is a big part of things coming up in GT Ministries. Also, he is a big part of things of Nuclear Winter for Nonstop Action Wrestling in a title match against the current Nonstop Action Wrestling world-class champion, the Wildcard Tommy Dillon, who's undefeated also in GT Ministries. So a lot to get into there. It's going to be a title for title match, Disciple and the Wildcard Tommy Dillon. That'll be about 9 o'clock British Standard Time with Disciple. It'll be next Thursday. So very, very excited about that. We will also have on, again, the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus. It'll be Wednesday next week, 7 o'clock British Standard Time, to speak about his historic Showcase Trophy win over Keenan. Friday, we're back also with more coverage after U.S. Thanksgiving with the LWF, with our LWF Power Hour with your old friend Wildfire Nate Reese, who's back in the house, and the Scenario Nathan Gunn, who just wrestled Bentley, and he's been broiled in a feud with Davey Getsky, who, by the way, was a former world champion in another company and is also the current champion of the LWF. He's the LWF World Champion, and Davey Getsky is obviously a huge part of things over in Bolton Town Wrestling, the Kingdom of Wrestling. So he's a name that many people know about quite a bit. So I'm looking forward to the Scenario Nathan Gunn returning to Sportswire Radio and Wildfire Nate Reese. That'll be about 8 o'clock British Standard Time. But in the meantime, please follow KOW one more time. Knockout W on Facebook, KO_wrestling on Twitter, Instagram, K_O_wrestling. Lucy Simons, Pro Wrestling Journalist on Facebook. Also, Lucy SIM Writes on Twitter. Lucy Sim01 on Instagram. And if you like what you hear from us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, you can listen to all of our great content on sportnarium.com/player. Also, like us on Facebook at Sportswire Radio. We just recently passed the 500 follower milestone. So thank you again, everybody, for your continued support of Sportswire Radio. As we were just with pro wrestling journalist and reporter, that is Lucy Simons, recapping the historic 10-year anniversary show for KOW. My name again is the Reverend Tom Bryce. I am the owner of Sportswire Radio. If you are on sportnarium.com/player, you'll go back to your regularly scheduled programming. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'll also be back here Wednesday afternoon, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, with the head coach of our Five-Town Sound men's, women's football teams here in the UK, Soccer in America. That is Jason Facina. Coach Facina just completed a highly successful season for the team, and we'll have a lot to get into. We had some big, big wins. We returned to the postseason. We'll also talk about some of our seniors and some big, big moments that the team had. It wasn't the season we had last year, but I think in some ways it was a better season. I'll talk with Coach Facina about that and more. That'll be FTC Men's Soccer on Instagram, FTC Women's Soccer on Instagram as well. Coach Facina on Instagram. Please follow and support him. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in here on the number one global radio station. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. We were here with Lucy Simons. I hope you guys will enjoy the day and the evening, wherever you may be, here on the number one global radio station, that is Sportswire Radio.